This video is about the questions from several friends regarding the interpretation of Ross Douthat's belief. Below are our responses, for reference only. Question 1. Religion and philosophy both provide meaning. So, what is the difference between believing in a philosophy and believing in a religion? Response. If you believe in a philosophy, then you are no longer a philosopher. Many philosophers insist that a certain school of thought is correct, but that is not called belief. It is called a position. A position is grounded in rational argument, open to questioning, subject to revision, and even encourages debate. If you say you believe in a philosophy, it means not only that you think the philosophy is correct, but that you go beyond rational agreement into the realm of emotion. You treat it as your core worldview, deeply tied to your sense of identity. On the positive side, someone who believes in a philosophy will live by it. For example, if you believe in Stoicism, you should remain calm in the face of honor or humiliation and live a simple, undramatic life. On the negative side, once a position rises to the level of belief, it becomes immune to criticism, closed to questioning, and resistant to change. Turning thought into dogma. Some people who believe in a philosophy may consider themselves superior to religious believers, since religion involves the supernatural, which seems less sophisticated, while philosophy sounds intellectual. But in my view, once a philosophy is elevated to belief, it is essentially no different from religion. It becomes an ideology. An ideology provides a ready-made package of worldview, life perspective, and values. We have everything here. Whatever you do must follow this spiritual guidance. Never forget you are a believer. That is not the attitude of a true scholar. Yet if a person genuinely has faith, it is worthy of respect. Even from a practical standpoint, a believer offers certainty. You can be confident that they will not be a fraud. Moreover, traditions like Christianity and scholastic philosophy not only allow debate, but also permit individuals to propose their own interpretations of Scripture, which shows some academic spirit. But there is another type of person. Those who actually only believe in a vulgar, self-serving philosophy, yet parade under the banner of believing in some lofty philosophy as a way of survival. Their daily work is nothing but singing praises, treating theory as sacred scripture, bowing down before their school of thought without engaging in peer-level discussion, not daring to offer their own interpretations, taking the superior's word as absolute and priding themselves on precisely grasping the superior's meaning. Outwardly, they act condescending in their preaching. Such people are worse than mere zealots. They are a disgrace to intellectual life. Question 2. Today I read a book called Plain Talk on the Method of Optimal Choice and the Method of Overall Planning. It mentioned the use of the golden ratio in the method of optimal choice. Suddenly, I felt like 0.618 is kind of universal. But does 618 truly have some divine property, or is it that later generations tried to mystify it by finding many matching phenomena as proof? Response. You're absolutely right. The golden ratio has been overhyped. Mr. Hua Luogang introduced the golden ratio in order to solve a very specific and practical mathematical problem. Ordinary people didn't really understand it, which led to many misinterpretations. The problem is like this. Suppose you want to mix a chemical compound from two substances. Or more simply, suppose you're making dough for steamed buns, but don't know how much flour and how much water to use. This is a problem of proportion. How can we design experiments to find the best ratio? For modern engineers, this is hardly a problem at all. You just pick 20 ratios between 0 and 1, say 0.05, 0.1, 0.15, make buns at each ratio, and test them all. Problem solved. But Hua Luogang came up with an academic solution. He asked, can we find the optimal ratio while doing as few experiments as possible, saving materials? To make this work, we assume that bun quality is a continuous function across the interval from 0 to 1, with only one peak. In other words, a convex function. Hua said, you should first pick two golden ratio points in this interval, namely x equals 0.382 and x equals 0.618, and run experiments at those 2 points. You'll find that one result is better than the other. For example, maybe the bun at x equals 0.618 tastes better. Next, you eliminate the section of the interval to the left of 0.382, and only consider the interval from 0.382 to 1. Then, within this new interval, you again select two golden ratio points and repeat the same procedure. Hua mathematically proved that, this iterative process quickly converges to the peak point. But let me emphasize again. In the real world, hardly anyone actually runs experiments this way. On one hand, this method is not necessarily cheaper than simply testing 10 evenly spaced values. On the other hand, Hua's method requires that, you get the result of one round of experiments, before planning the next round. Which is extremely time-consuming. Imagine trying to find the optimal ratio of pesticide to water. You'd have to wait for each trial's pest control effect before starting the next one. How long would that take? Of course, Hua wasn't unaware of this. But at that particular historical moment, when pure mathematics was criticized as bourgeois for not producing economic benefits, he had no choice but to frame his work in this way. Meanwhile, the public only remembered the term golden ratio. People began saying the golden ratio represents the ultimate standard of beauty, that the human body conforms to it, that airplane wings and turbine blades are designed according to it for better aerodynamics, that credit cards and even iPhones use it in their shapes. All of this is nonsense. In reality, those examples are not based on the golden ratio. They're just rectangles of varying proportions, and design points that happen not to fall in the exact center. Come on. When you see a beautiful woman, do you actually measure whether her navel-to-height ratio is 0.618 or 0.65? Personally, I think 0.65 looks better than 0.618. Question 3. From the perspective of the origins of civilization, why did Judaism, the ancestor of monotheism, develop into a monotheistic religion, while ancient Greek religion, Buddhism, and Daoism were all polytheistic? Could you clarify this? Response. Both archaeological evidence and the textual records in the Old Testament show that, the Jewish people once worshipped other deities. They originally practiced polytheism as well. Polytheism is natural. When ancient people faced various mysterious phenomena, they assumed that different gods were in charge. Each with their own domain. Gods could conflict with one another. Some were powerful, others weak. Some gods might even have originated from humans. But monotheism is more advanced. We've discussed this before, in Ben Shapiro's book, The Right Side of History, which makes this very point. In polytheism, gods can act capriciously, doing whatever they please. To avoid being harmed, people had to serve the gods, bribe them, and in some cases, like the Shang dynasty in China, even offer human sacrifices. Monotheism is different. God rules over everything, so he is not arbitrary or whimsical. He represents objective order. If we simply follow God's laws, we can live well. Under monotheism, people no longer need to bribe the divine, and they can develop a stronger, more independent sense of self. Question 4. I sometimes visit temples and burn incense as a sign of respect. During the new year, we have customs like burning incense to honor our ancestors, or going to the village shrine to worship our Dagong for peace throughout the year. On the 5th day, we welcome the god of wealth, and we also have traditions like the kitchen goddess. So, does this essentially count as believing in gods? Response. I would say what you're describing is a healthy form of traditional cultural practice, because you don't truly believe in gods. If you really did, you would assume that deities are watching over you at every moment of your life and directly intervening in it. But clearly that's not your mindset. In fact, the vast majority of Chinese people don't genuinely believe in gods, and this is precisely the cultural tradition that has persisted since the Western Zhou period. Li Shua, in his book The Grand History of Confucius, discussed this very issue. Before the Zhou, the Chinese truly believed in gods. Human sacrifices recorded in the fall of the Shang are examples. After the Zhou, thanks to the Cultural Revolution led by the Duke of Zhou, the nature of ritual changed completely. Simply put, after the Zhou, people performed sacrifices merely to express respect toward gods and ancestors, without expecting them to actually intervene in affairs. Confucius said, "Respect ghosts and spirits, but keep them at a distance, and, if you don't yet understand life, how can you understand death?" And sacrifice as if they were present, sacrifice to the spirits as if the spirits were present. All of these mean, when we hold rituals at festivals, we act as though the spirits are there, but in daily life, nobody really cares whether they exist. Of course, there were always a few overly superstitious individuals, but even in Confucius' time, such people were looked down upon. The master did not speak of the strange, the violent, the disorderly, or the supernatural. That's the proper elite stance. It doesn't mean rejecting science or curiosity. It means rejecting greed, and never expecting divine powers to solve personal problems. In the Book of Rites, Confucius specifically noted, in ancient times, the enlightened kings of the three dynasties all honored heaven and earth and the spirits, but their divination was solely for the public good. They never dared to use it for private matters. In other words, one may only pray for good harvests for all the people, not for one's own fortune through fortune-telling or drawing lots. By this standard, if someone donates a large sum to a temple just to boost their business, that is not only intellectually foolish, but also morally a profanation of the divine. That's it for today's content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.